After World War II, Britain was devastated, and Maurice Wilks, the managing director of Rover, needed to come up with a product soon to utilize their two idling factories. The country's economy had collapsed, and there was a severe shortage of raw materials including steel. However, two brilliant British men came up with an idea that would change the company's future forever. What began as a farmer's best friend eventually transformed into a symbol of prestige. Throughout their journey, Land Rover faced numerous challenges including wartime obstacles, financial crises, and multiple acquisitions. Despite these hurdles, Land Rover has become one of the most luxurious and expensive vehicle brands in the world. The story of Land Rover is a truly fascinating one you would hear in the automotive industry. Their humble beginnings trace back to a bicycle shop in Coventry, England. In 1865, John Kemp Starley was working in his uncle's sewing machine shop. After running the business for some time, his uncle realized it was time to change the product line. So, 4 years into the business, James Starley, John's uncle, decided to shift the focus from sewing machines to bicycles. While working at his uncle's shop, John met William Sutton. Together, John and William formed their own company, Starley & Sutton Co., in Coventry, England, to produce bicycles. One of their most famous products was a tricycle named the Rover. They named it Rover because it was the term used for bicycles in Polish and Belarusian. For about 25 years, Starley & Sutton produced various bicycles, including the Rover safety bicycle, which is considered the template for the modern bicycle. By the 1900s, Starley & Sutton had grown into a big company and had expanded into automobiles. In 1901, an entrepreneur named H.J. Lawson purchased Starley & Sutton Co., but he wasn't happy with the company's name. He decided that Rover would be a better fit for the company. So, he began trading bicycles and automobiles under the name Rover. However, World War I brought many challenges for Rover, leading to several years of financial losses. Unfortunately, by 1924, they were forced to completely stop bicycle production. It took 5 years for the management of Rover to turn around the business after making some careful decisions. The world was in a Great Depression, and so was Britain. Doing business was very hard. However, for many European automobile manufacturers, the period between 1930 and 1939 was very busy as the countries ramped up their military productions. The British government ensured the continuous supply of military equipment primarily through a strategy called shadow factories. The British government placed a small factory in disguise next to large factories, solely to produce military equipment. Automobile companies benefited from this, and so did Rover. Rover received 3 shadow factories from the British government. However, during World War II, the Rover headquarters in Coventry was bombed and destroyed. So, to continue the business, they had to modify their 2 shadow factories in Solihull and Birmingham. Private car production started back in Solihull in December 1945, but Britain after World War II was devastated. Crucial raw materials like steel were in short supply, and the government rationed steel for companies that had an export product or involved in agriculture. Getting steel wasn't easy for Rover unless they developed a product that supported British economy. However, 2 genius British men came up with an idea that's gonna change the company's future forever. Spencer Wilks and Maurice Wilks were brothers working at Rover as managing director and chief designer. They badly needed a product soon to keep the 2 factories up and running, so they kept brainstorming until they came up with a brilliant idea. One day, Maurice borrowed a Jeep from his neighbor and was surprised by how handy it was around his farm. Maurice really enjoyed the ride, but he knew that eventually when the Jeep broke down, there would be no parts to repair or replace in England. So, Maurice was struck with the idea of building his own Jeep so that he didn't have to worry about losing the experience. Maurice was excited to share this idea with his brother Spencer, so he took a drive with him to the beach in the Jeep. Maurice showed his idea to Spencer by drawing an outline of the vehicle he had in his mind on the sand. It was a working vehicle, something more valuable than a Jeep, and they wanted to popularize it as farmer's best friend. Spencer was impressed with the idea and wanted to put it into production as soon as possible. In 1947, they bought 2 Jeeps, stripped them down to the frame, and built a prototype on the same frame. However, the 2 brothers didn't want to copy Jeep. They wanted to build something more valuable than Jeep for farmers. Now, since steel was short, the next option was aluminum, which really came in very handy, because it was in abundance, corrosion-resistant, and lightweight. Rover had a surplus paint used for painting aircraft cabins, so they applied it to their new product. The early prototypes of this vehicle had shades of light green. One day, when Spencer was driving this vehicle in the rugged landscape of his estate in Islay, Scotland, the gamekeeper Ian Fraser observed, "This must be a Land Rover." It was the moment the legendary name was born, the Land Rover. Land Rover was put into production with an initial plan of selling 5,000 units, but in the first year, they sold 8,000 and doubled in the following year. The price of a Land Rover was £450. However, they gave some extra options for customers like passenger seats, a spare wheel, a door side screen, or a canvas top at an additional cost. But soon, they realized that it wasn't the right way to sell it. So many of these features became standard by 1948, and the price rose to £540. The Land Rover got the spotlight at the Amsterdam Motor Show held in 1948. This new product was released at a time when the world was starving for an off-road vehicle like this. They faced no competition at the beginning because after the war, Jeep was focusing more on passenger vehicles. Farmers around the world, oil prospectors in the Middle East, coffee growers in Africa, and construction workers in the UK all loved the Land Rover. The original wheelbase was 80 inches, which was the same as Jeep's, but due to the high demand, it was expanded up to 88 and 109 inches, and it remained the same for the next 30 years. By 1958, their sales skyrocketed to 28,000 a year with 3 wheelbase options and 3 engine options. The Land Rover became a favorite vehicle of the British royal family. However, by the 1950s, they started seeing competition because Jeep was keeping a close eye on Land Rover. In the 1950s, Jeep was looking at opportunities to open its European base. Also, UK's largest automobile company, BMC, was designing the Austin Gypsy in search of success in the same segment of Land Rover. Soon, the Rover company realized it was the right time to seriously redesign Land Rover. One thing they had in their favor was the real-world service and the customer feedback over 30 years. The Rover company made some major changes to the Land Rover, including improved suspension, a new 4-wheel drive system, and a 2.3-liter engine with 70 horsepower. Finally, the designers were given a chance to go at the Land Rover. A new series of Land Rover was introduced in 1961 with new interior and exterior upgrades. However, not very comfortable yet. In 1968, it was restyled again due to some growing regulations around the world, including the locations of the headlights. By 1970s, Land Rover kept breaking records by producing 1,000 units per week. Throughout the entire history of Land Rover, they have experienced many acquisitions. In 1967, Leyland Motor Corporation acquired the Rover Company, and a year after, they merged with British Motor Holdings to form the British Leyland Motor Corporation. This merger brought in many companies like Triumph, MG, Austin Morris, Jaguar, Daimler, and Rover under one umbrella. However, despite the changes, Land Rover continued production. By the end of 1960s, they had acquired over 90% of the 4x4 market share in Australia and South Africa. In 1971, the Land Rover Series 3 was introduced with some minor cosmetic changes. Even though some attempts have been made to add some comfort to passengers, it wasn't successful as it pushed the vehicle's price from a commercial vehicle to a passenger vehicle bracket. In the meantime, Land Rover saw the opportunity to add a second vehicle to their fleet. So, in 1967, they started the 100-inch station wagon project under the program name Velar, which was actually a secret project within the company. Velar means veil or cover in Italian. The new vehicle had coil springs, a full-time four-wheel drive system, a 4-speed transmission, hydraulic disc brakes, and Buick alloys. This product was the Range Rover. What makes this new release very interesting is that the whole vehicle was designed by engineers, and designers were not involved in any part of the process. In fact, the engineers designed the body just to cover up the mechanicals. However, when it was introduced in 1970, everybody loved it very much. It was available only in two-door until 1981. Interestingly, it was originally aimed at customers like construction foremen or military officers, but it quickly became the car of choice for aristocratic landowners. The engineers would have never thought that Range Rover would become their most iconic vehicle in the fleet. Land Rover's product portfolio is set to expand further with some exciting additions in the coming years. In the 1970s, British Leyland was in a terrible financial situation. The main reason was they were producing multiple brands with similar products, competing with each other product-wise and resource-wise. They were the biggest automobile manufacturer in Britain, yet they went bankrupt in 1975, leaving millions of jobs at risk. Actually, it wasn't an impact the British economy was comfortable absorbing, so the government made the decision to nationalize British Leyland. Eventually, the Rover company separated from British Leyland and now they are operating more independently. The name of the company also changed from Rover to Land Rover, influenced by their most successful product so far. In 1981, the Range Rover introduced the four-door option, and with what they experienced in the market, they wanted to move it further up by making major improvements in the interior and exterior. In the meantime, this was the period in which Land Rover introduced their 110 and 90 wheelbases, which have remained the same to this day. Now, Land Rover has two massively popular products, the Land Rover and the Range Rover. However, the company failed to maintain a good reputation due to its substandard build quality and unreliability, something British Leyland was famous at that time. These were heavily compared with Japanese competitors like Toyota Land Cruiser and Nissan Patrol. They were slowly eating into Land Rover's export markets. In 1988, British Aerospace purchased Land Rover for £150 million. And a year later, Land Rover surprised the world again with another product, which received a positive reception at the 1989 Frankfurt Motor Show, the Land Rover Discovery. The Range Rover had already moved upmarket, leaving its original niche, so the Discovery was created using the same chassis, suspension, and four-wheel drive system to place where Range Rover was originally created. The goal was to create a family car that was suitable for daily driving while maintaining full off-road capability. The Discovery became the third model in Land Rover's 40-year history. Same as the Range Rover, Discovery also initially came with 2 doors and extended into 4 after 2 years. To distinguish the original Land Rover model from the Discovery, the company renamed the Land Rover as Land Rover Defender, especially influenced by the high use in military purposes around the world. In 1994, the company released the second generation of its luxury SUV, the Range Rover Series 2. Since Discovery replaced the middle market, they added more features and trims to move the Range Rover further up. This was the first Range Rover that swapped into rectangular headlights from circular ones. Land Rover introduced its autobiography design service that allowed buyers to customize interiors with top-quality materials. It was one of the very few high-end SUVs available on the market at that time. Also, it was the time that Land Rover caught in the sight of German car giant BMW. In 1994, BMW acquired Land Rover for $1.35 billion. Even though Land Rover sales were up, they still had issues in terms of reliability. Most of their profits were eaten up by warranty claims. In 1997, BMW expanded its product lineup by introducing the Freelander, a premium compact 4x4 designed to be a smaller version of the Discovery. The Freelander quickly gained popularity, particularly outside of America, and was recognized as Europe's best-selling 4x4 for 4 consecutive years. In 1998, the Discovery 2 was launched, featuring 720 improvements over its predecessor. The 2000s marked the most exciting period in Land Rover's history. Also, it was time for Land Rover to move to a new owner. In 2000, BMW sold Land Rover to Ford for $2.7 billion. Ford integrated Land Rover into its premier automotive group, which also included Jaguar, Aston Martin, and Volvo. However, it was BMW that transformed the Range Rover into the well-known brand we recognize today. They primarily developed the next generation of the Range Rover, and Ford greatly benefited from it. The new model was launched in 2001, quickly gaining popularity and continuing to sell very well from the 2000s until 2012, with some incremental updates along the way. In 2004, the Discovery 3 was introduced, followed by the Discovery 4 5 years later. The Discovery 4 featured significant upgrades in both interior and exterior design, aiming to provide a more luxurious appearance. However, the SUV struggled to establish a reputation for its reliability, particularly in markets like America and the Middle East. Ford attempted to address these reliability issues, but their efforts yielded mixed results. Throughout the 2000s, the Defender underwent several changes to comply with emission and safety regulations, as well as modifications to its layout by copying some from the Discovery 3. In 2005, Land Rover introduced its fifth model, the Range Rover Sport. This vehicle was adapted from the original Range Rover and was designed to be a sportier and more dynamic version while still providing luxury and off-road capability. In 2006, the Freelander 2 was introduced, which also became the first Land Rover model to be discontinued after 9 years, mainly due to reliability issues including engine, transmission, and sunroof failures. During its production, the Freelander was recalled 5 times. By 2007, Ford faced a severe cash flow problem. So, after 6 years of ownership, Ford sold Land Rover and Jaguar to Tata Group in India for $2.3 billion, surprisingly a lower price than what they had paid to acquire them. In 2011, Tata Motors reorganized Land Rover and Jaguar, creating a single entity in the UK responsible for the design and manufacturing of both brands. The first addition to the lineup under Tata was the Range Rover Evoque, launched in 2011. The Evoque was offered with 3 engine options and featured a 9-speed automatic transmission system. In 2012, the new Range Rover was launched, featuring exclusive changes to both the interior and exterior. It quickly became the most popular Range Rover to date, attracting many celebrity owners who sought out this premium SUV. In 2013, Range Rover Sport also received significant upgrades to its interior and exterior, similar to those made to the Range Rover. In the following year, the Discovery Sport was introduced to fill the gap left by the Freelander 2, offering a similarly sized compact sports SUV with off-road capabilities. In 2015, the production of Land Rover's iconic Defender came to an end. However, after 4 years, it was redesigned and reintroduced as a modern 4x4 SUV with a completely new body and advanced features. The second generation of the Range Rover Evoque was launched in 2018, followed by the Discovery Sport 2 in 2019. Both models share the same platform as the Jaguar E-Pace. The latest versions of the Range Rover and Range Rover Sport were unveiled in 2022, featuring exclusive options that set them apart from competitors. As a result, Range Rover has become a symbol of status in the SUV market. Currently, Land Rover Jaguar manufactures vehicles in 5 countries: the UK, Slovakia, Brazil, China, and India. The company offers a lineup of 7 premium SUVs. Land Rover's sales in the United States increased every year for a decade until the pandemic in 2020. Notably, Land Rover sells double the number of units compared to Jaguar. The Range Rover and its sub-brands, Range Rover Sport, Velar, and Evoque, account for 70% of Land Rover's sales. Originally designed as a farmer's best friend, the Land Rover has now become one of the most luxurious and prestigious SUV brands in the world. We have reached the end of another documentary. Before we wrap up, I'd love to hear about your dream Land Rover SUV in the comments. If you already own one, please share your thoughts on it. If you enjoyed this video, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. There are some exciting documentaries coming up. Thank you very much for watching until the end. I'll see you in a new video soon.